Maybe I'll talk about it in two parts. First, what you were mentioning in 2000, the UN Security Council 1325 resolution, which is a really landmark event because what it did and what it recognized was women not being seen as victims in relation to conflict and those issues, but really as part of the solution finders, participants, and also leaders in terms of addressing conflict, both in terms of prevention and resolution. Now here in Tanzania, and we'll talk more about that, but the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, which falls under the umbrella of 1325, the Security Council resolution, was launched in August 2025. So just recently, and there are big congratulations to Tanzania for this event. But why does 1325 and women, peace and security matter? Right now, of course, we know the world is really marked by conflict, by climate disasters, climate change. And so having this resolution and ensuring its implementation and its realization is of critical importance for every country in the world. I just want to emphasize that the resolution calls for equal and meaningful participation of women in all parts of peace and security. UN Women is going to continue its technical leadership and convening support across all 4 pillars of the WPS agenda, which are participation, protection, prevention, and relief and recovery. And the work that we're really focusing on in terms of looking forward and our continued engagement is in terms of integrating gender-responsive indicators and supporting budget allocations, as I mentioned, for WPS in security and governance frameworks, strengthening the institutional capacities for data collection, analysis, and reporting, establishing coordination and coordinated review processes with annual progress reporting, and then fostering multi-stakeholder partnerships and continuing those so that this isn't something that is just one entity or one institution owns, but that it's really a whole of society process. Civil society organizations, women's rights organizations are critical partners at every step of this process, both in the development, as I mentioned, and then on its implementation, as well as oversight and accountability. It's important also to emphasize that the civil society engagement role goes beyond advocacy, while that's really important, but it's also about really monitoring and holding institutions to account that they're delivering on those commitments, how to ensure that women's voices are really integrally involved in and part of and driving decision-making. Really looking at how can we continue to provide or facilitate spaces for civil society organizations, women's rights organizations to come together, learn from each other, learn from younger civil society actors, youth-led, as well as women-led organizations, but then also all the opportunities for exchange among civil society players in this space. We also see an opportunity for ensuring that civil society is actively part of policy dialogues, together with Parliament and other actors as part of this oversight and accountability function. And of course, we depend also on our civil society partners to hold us also accountable. So if civil society and women's rights organizations feel that they're not adequately in the space, or they need new opportunities and would like to engage with us also around that, we're always open to hearing that and how we can continue that support. We're looking both at institutional and localized impact and trying to ensure that the measurement and the assessments are being done at different levels. So some of the key areas that we're going to be considering and looking at and supporting government and other actors to be monitoring are looking at how women are actively participating in peace and security decision-making spaces, as well as and including defense, mediation platforms, and local peace committees. So looking again at the more sort of like mechanisms and structures actors, and then also local level, peace committees and other spaces where we need to be sure that women are part of those. Women's increased participation in regional and sectoral peace and security mechanisms is really important. Monitoring allocation of funds and resources through the national budget to ensure that the commitments that have been made are actually being implemented. And some of the tools we'll be encouraging in terms of use for monitoring are things like community safety surveys and an annual national progress report, which will capture some of these key indicators of success and any challenges that need to be addressed. This comes back to the idea of accountability, right? What does it look like a year out? What can we realistically expect? And also what can we say if it doesn't happen, we need to see change? Operationalizing the TNAP coordination and consultative structures, which is where also making sure that civil society is actively engaged and all of the other stakeholders. And that's inclusive of the National Steering Committee that I mentioned. So that national level body that will allow for this, and UN Women supporting that and those ongoing efforts. And I think what we can see there and what, capacity building, we know it isn't always immediately measurable, but looking at what are those kinds of changes we can see in terms of institutional approaches, the ways personnel are engaging, and the things that they're able to articulate. The launching of a 1325 CSO network, together with support from actually the Government of Ireland, in collaboration with civil society partners, of course. And that is really, really important because it's solidifying a space and an engaging kind of dynamic for civil society organizations who are already involved in and have been really integral in taking us to this point, but then how do we take it further and how do we ensure that immediate implementation? So that network should be launched in the next few months. Tanzanians can really anticipate the functional WPS steering committee, gender responsive security sectors or pieces of moving towards that with personnel etc. changes, especially in terms of defense forces. And that's just, let me say, we also have work that we're doing with TPDF under the ELSI Fund initiative, ELSI Initiative Fund. And that is looking at a barrier assessment to understand what are the barriers that keep or impede women's participation in security forces. And that information will also then inform changes. So those collaborations and that kind of work is also coming in this year. Ultimately, it's about every single person's engagement, right? First, I want to say, and we're all committed to this, but peace flourishes when justice, equality, accountability, and opportunities for all are upheld. Women and youth are central to shaping Tanzania's future, and they have to be and continue to be central in terms of recognition and engagement and participation and leadership in terms of being active contributors and not passive. They're really the solution finders, and we want that always to be seen. Find the spaces where you can talk and come together, and hold institutions, including UN Women, accountable, and push for solutions that reflect the realities of your communities and your lived experience.